in the New York Times, and they're going to write some think piece about it, or on this website or that website. And they're going to go against it and talk about, oh, this is a retrograde vision, or that this is a regressive vision, or Quentin has become right-wing, and this movie has a right-wing bent because of the way they, Quentin is identifying with Rick Dalton with hippies.
This Hollywood director does not care about woke Hollywood. This is a man who's had a legendary career making the movies he wants to make, never backing down, never censoring his art. And now, in a Hollywood that's all about pleasing the woke critics, Quentin Tarantino is hitting back, hard.
Making unwanted advances. That's how I looked at it. But I wish I'd talked to him. I wish I had sat him down and go, Harvey, you can't do this. You're going to up everything.
Do you think that no one talked to him, and maybe that was how he got so completely out of control?
Yeah, maybe his brother Bob.
If you're a Tarantino fan, you know he doesn't hold back. From heated responses in interviews to crazy scenes in his movies, Quentin Tarantino isn't here to keep things neat and tidy for Hollywood's politically correct crowd.
I'm a big fan of action and violence in cinema. I always said that it was almost as if it was one of the reasons Thomas Edison invented the camera, was to film violence, right? Because it's so good. And the genres that I'm attracted to tend to be genres that deal freely in that kind of stuff. And it has to be done well, because if you don't do it well, then it actually has no effect.
And guess what? They hate it. We're getting into exactly how Tarantino's brutal honesty and refusal to conform has made him Hollywood's #1 woke culture enemy. Let's start with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the film that had the woke critics foaming at the mouth.
This is a, person with a great deal of acting talent, and yet you haven't really given her many lines in the movie. And I wondered, I guess that was a deliberate choice on your part, and I just wanted to know why that was, that we don't hear her actually speaking very much. And Margot, I wanted you to also comment about being in the film in this part.
Well, I just reject your hypotheses.
Right.
The complaint? Tarantino didn't give Margot Robbie enough lines as Sharon Tate. Yep, critics were outraged over a line count, as if that's the only thing that makes a role meaningful. During a press conference, a New York Times journalist practically demanded an explanation for the limited dialogue. And Tarantino? He fired back with, "I reject your hypothesis." No apology, no pandering, just flat-out rejection. Margot Robbie even backed him up, saying that her character didn't need lines to make an impact.
Like I said earlier, I always look to the character and what the character is supposed to serve to the story. I think the moments that I got on screen gave an opportunity to honor Sharon and the lightness. I don't think it was intended to delve.
Her portrayal of Sharon Tate was about capturing a certain lightness and presence. Robbie actually saw it as an opportunity to play a character through actions and presence, not dialogue. She described it as a rare exercise in acting, being able to dive deep into a character without words. But of course, the critics didn't care. All they saw was a lack of lines, completely missing the artistic intention behind the choice. But that's just the beginning. Tarantino has been vocal about his frustration with Hollywood's obsession with ideological messaging. In an interview with Bill Maher, he took aim at the current state of the film industry, saying that ideology trumps art.
Besides the great entertainment, I have always really appreciated the way you pushed back. When anyone tried to stifle you, shut you up, shame you, bully you. They tried it with the last one, with Once Upon a Time in the Hollywood, some bullshit about Margot Robbie doesn't have enough lines. And you do what I wish other people would do. Instead of apologizing like a little pussy, you say, I don't agree with your assessment.
According to Tarantino, Hollywood today isn't about making good movies. It's about signaling virtue. Filmmakers are more concerned with sending the right message than actually telling a compelling story. He openly criticized Hollywood for prioritizing ideology over everything else, over creativity, over entertainment, and definitely over authenticity. On Maher's show, Tarantino didn't hold back about what's wrong with Hollywood today. He called it a cycle, a period of rigid political correctness that he's seen before, and one that he's certain will eventually pass.
You have to always look at it.
Are we going to get back to that place?
Look, this happened. This comes in waves. This absolutely comes in waves. All right. So it's like, okay, just looking at the 40s. All right, that was during the wartime, but that's also the time that you had film noir, where you actually, even though with the Hays Code,
you had these dark, dark stories that were being told. But then after the war was won, then you had the 50s, which was the first of the completely homogenized decades, where you couldn't say shit if you had a mouthful.
He believes the film industry swings back and forth, from free expression to censorship, and he's hopeful that a new golden age of film will come around soon, just like it did after the conservative 50s. But if you thought that was intense, wait until you hear what he said to Joe Rogan. Tarantino openly blasted cancel culture, calling out the self-censorship that's taken over Hollywood.
When I finished it and had been on the film festival circuit with it for a year, when Miramax bought it, Harvey tried to talk me into cutting the torture scene out. With Mr. Blonde and the guy in the chair and
Getting
the
his ear cut off.
Yeah. He tried to talk me out of that, and his reasoning was, he might ended up being right. All right, his reasoning was, look, Quentin, this is a movie that anybody can watch.
He described today's film industry as 80s Part 2, but even worse. Back in the day, Hollywood avoided controversial topics on its own. But today, the censorship is stronger and enforced by an entire mob mentality. Tarantino didn't hold back, calling it a self-fulfilling prophecy, where people say, oh, you can't do that. And eventually it becomes true because everyone buys into the fear. He misses the gritty, no-holds-barred films from the 80s and 90s, the kind of movies that dared to push boundaries without fear of backlash.
And it's just like, there was like nothing like that available in America. They're like, oh my God, this is the wildest shit ever, man. This is amazing. And so I remember I was like sitting at Video Archives and I was saying, well, I want to do shit like that.
And let's face it, Tarantino has always been a master at making people uncomfortable. He's created characters that are dark, flawed, and even violent, but he does it in a way that captivates audiences. In his eyes, Hollywood has become terrified of offending anyone, and that fear is sucking the life out of cinema. Take The Hateful Eight, for example. Tarantino considers it one of his boldest works, a movie that gets into the darkest sides of humanity with brutal honesty.
Inciting idea that gets me to actually sit down at the desk and take a bunch of blank pieces of paper and start writing from scratch. Well, here was the idea, was the fact that in the last few years, I have a real big TV collection. I've been taping random episodes off of television that I like.
What are you watching?
Well, just in particular older shows.
It's not an easy watch. It's raw, cynical, and yes, violent. Critics who usually love Tarantino couldn't handle it, saying the film was too rough. But for Tarantino, that reaction was a win. He didn't make The Hateful Eight to be liked. He made it to challenge his audience, to throw them into a chaotic world where no one is clean, no one is redeemable, and everyone is just a little bit hateful. He even said he made The Hateful Eight to get his hands dirty, to make a film that isn't afraid to be uncomfortable. One critic said Tarantino couldn't keep his hands clean when playing with themes like racism and misogyny. Tarantino's response? Who wants clean hands? To him, storytelling isn't about making things comfortable or palatable. It's about showing life in all its gritty, messed-up reality. He's not interested in sanitized stories, and he sure as hell isn't interested in catering to woke Hollywood's fragile sensibilities. So where did Tarantino's fearless approach come from? Look back at his journey with Reservoir Dogs. This was the film that put him on the map, and it was filled with scenes that Hollywood wasn't ready for. Take the infamous torture scene where Mr. Blonde torments a cop. Tarantino took the film to festivals. People were walking out. Some couldn't handle it, but Tarantino didn't care. He knew this scene was crucial to the story's raw, unforgiving tone. Even Miramax's Harvey Weinstein tried to convince him to cut it, saying it would limit the film's appeal, especially with women. But Tarantino stood firm. This was his vision, and he wasn't going to water it down for anyone. And that choice paid off. The scene has since become iconic, a defining moment in Tarantino's career that showed he wouldn't compromise his art. Tarantino's refusal to give in to censorship set the tone for the rest of his career, a career marked by pushing boundaries, defying norms, and standing up to Hollywood's so-called standards. Now let's talk about likability.
You know, there's all kinds of scenes that I respond to in movies. I respond to music sequences. I respond to big comedy sequences. It was like they galvanized the entire theater. Everybody woke up. Everybody got connected. And I would go see a film that had a sequence like that. I would see it 2 or 3 times at the theaters just to see that sequence.
Hollywood has this idea that characters need to be likable, and that audiences won't connect with flawed, morally complex characters. But Tarantino completely rejects that notion. To him, characters are interesting because of their flaws. Look at iconic roles like Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver or the anti-heroes in Tarantino's own movies. These aren't characters you're supposed to idolize. They're flawed, dark, and sometimes even terrifying. But that's exactly what makes them compelling. Tarantino has said that Hollywood's current obsession with making characters likable is stifling creativity.
I always want the scenes to work on a few different levels. When it comes to dealing with genre, I want to transcend the genre. But I don't want it to be an art film meditation on genre. I want it to deliver the goods. Rick is the one who pretends to be the badass cowboy, the guy who can do this and the guy who can do that.
In the 70s, audiences accepted complex characters who might not get a happy ending, who might even die in meaningless ways. But the woke film industry today doesn't want that. They want heroes who are easy to root for, characters who are sanitized and safe. In Tarantino's words, that's boring. He's here to make movies that reflect the chaos and messiness of real life, not to serve up a cookie-cutter story with a neat moral bow. But what about Hollywood's fixation on virtue signaling?
He said something in the fact that, well, Tarantino's playing with racism and misogyny and gruesomeness, and there's really no way you can do that and keep your hands clean.
That's a good way to put it.
It's a good way to put it. And I was like, who wants clean hands?
Yeah. Yeah.
I make Hateful Eight to get them dirty.
Right.
Tarantino calls it out as the biggest trend of all, Hollywood's need to showcase its moral standing rather than tell a good story. He's even said that today's movies are divided into two categories: superhero flicks and virtue signaling projects. Gone are the days of edgy, complex films. Now, it's all about playing it safe and ticking off the boxes that make Hollywood look good. Tarantino doesn't have time for this nonsense, and he's made it clear that he won't be part of a system that prioritizes image over integrity. And let's not forget his views on censorship.
I just watched Superbad the other day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, I don't even know if you could do Superbad today. And that's not even that long ago.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't believe in that kind of statement, because the thing about it is, I think that statement is a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy.
Tarantino argues that censorship and cancel culture are destroying the freedom that filmmakers once had. He describes this as an era even worse than the politically correct 80s. Back then, it was more about self-censorship, but now it's an outright witch hunt. Tarantino says it feels like a blacklist, where filmmakers are punished for not aligning with the correct views. Quentin Tarantino isn't here to be liked, and he's definitely not here to cater to woke Hollywood. He's here to make the movies he wants to make, the way he wants to make them. And if that means stepping on a few toes, so be it. Tarantino's war on woke culture is a reminder that true art doesn't conform to anyone's standards. It challenges, it disturbs, and yes, sometimes it offends. But that's what makes it powerful. If you're tired of Hollywood's watered-down, politically correct agenda, hit that like button and subscribe. Let's keep celebrating the actors who dare to push boundaries, who refuse to apologize, and who remind us what real storytelling is all about. Quentin Tarantino isn't backing down, and neither should we.